Today we are kicking off the second in our IQTAR seminar series. A little bit different. We're mixing it up. So now last week you heard from Kevin Murak, absolutely fantastic seminar, and encouraging all of us to walk and exercise so we can maybe reverse our aging. And then today we have got a path, and this goes along with our overall grand challenges that IQTAR has said we will take on, wicked problems that we will try to solve, or I don't think we'll be able to solve it, but we'll maybe address them. And then we're going to help as part of that. And so as we have talked about it, what you eat, how you exercise, what's your mental health status, what's your behavior, all of that ties into your well-being and your well-health, including policies and the economic status. Everything around this, technologies that support that, and the ecosystem that supports that. So part of that is this discussion about also sustainability and resiliency of whatever ecosystem you're talking about that is going to support this kind of thing. Overall, with the state, well, for everyone. And so today's discussion will introduce Dr. Meredith Adkins to come in. But Meredith is an assistant research professor at the UW, and she has a public policy background, as well as a lot of experience with outreach and engagement with many different stakeholders, everybody from the community to all the way from policymakers or legislature people, and as well as international experience. So we are having Meredith come and be discussed with a panel that Meredith introduced of thought leaders who are going to be able to talk to us about one aspect of this sustainability. So Meredith.
Thank you. Go ahead and come up here.
Also in the middle.
That's perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone, and good morning to the Zoom audience as well. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Jung. As Ronu shared, IQDAR is focusing on the initial grand challenge of integrative health and the physiological, social, and environmental factors that play into our overall well-being. And since I joined IQDAR, I've been particularly focused on the food systems aspect of that. And there are some major challenges coming in the decades ahead, from feeding the world's population to the need to support rural economies that are declining, small farmers that are increasingly disconnected from the institutional supply chain. And so we've brought several panelists with us here today that are working on different aspects of feeding the world, doing it more sustainably, and supporting local food systems. And so we're excited to have that conversation today. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, but also during your intro, just to share a little bit briefly about your work. So we'll start with Dr. Walter Bottje, and ask you to share a little bit about your role at the university as a faculty in Department of Cultural Science, and a little bit about the Center of Excellence that you lead.
Yeah, I'm Walter Bottje, professor. My area is physiology. I've been here a few years and watched some tremendous changes with the department center. My area of research is focused on sort of a cell physiology area, so looking at the cellular basis of feed efficiency, which is a very important trait in genetics. 4 years ago, we started a 5-year sustainable ag systems grant that we can, and a lot of the focus on that is kind of deals around water, and them to really look at this some really big issues are coming, with water, whether we like it or not. Some of it is too much at the wrong time. A lot of it is just not enough.
Great, thank you. All right, and Trevor, would you please introduce your role at Cobb-Vantress?
So I'm Trevor Gies, and I'm privileged of leading marketing, global communications at Cobb. So Cobb is a global genetics company. So we work with broiler breeding stock, chicken, and we work with companies all over the world. We're a global company, footprint expand to 5 continents, and we work with a global distribution network and customers and integrators. Companies like Tyson Foods, Georgia, Simmons are some local ones here that we would work with, but they're spread across the world. You know, we have a special unique privilege as being one of 2 companies in the world that does what we do at large scale. And we have a unique position in the food supply chain. We're the start of the supply chain for chicken. And working with research institutes, science community, and others in the industry, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, I think. We're really excited. Get into too much. I know there's questions coming. Happy to be here. Happy to see you.
Strikes me as really resonates. You're at the start of the supply chain. So from there, that really defines a lot of what comes us. We'll dig into that a little bit more. And then Emily, will you please share a little bit about your role at Walton Family Foundation and also just briefly your background, share that so you have an understanding of your multi-sector career.
I'm Emily English. I'm a senior program officer with the Walton Family Foundation, and I support place-based initiative here in Northwest Arkansas aimed at building and supporting our local system, primarily small to mid-scale vegetable producers, connecting them to markets that feed our. My background is in public health, started in small farming, as a faculty member here at the medical school for several years to this. And, you know, all of my research and programming really focused on increasing access to health, primarily using local system strategies, a lot of part to school and part to institution work. So that's
Great, thank you. So we'll have a few questions that we'll start with here, and towards the end of the panel, we'd love to take audience questions as well. Let's start with talking just a little bit about sustainability broadly and what it means to work. And so, Trevor, why don't we start with you and talk a little bit about Cobb-Vantress and how you're kind of approaching sustainability, what is the company looking at in terms of where you need to go as a company.
So I would say for Cobb, sustainability for us means making decisions for the future of life. So we can't continue doing the same things we've done forever. We continue feeding the world. Look at the global population. I think we just surpassed 8 billion people. And from a complete supply chain, not just protein, but if you look at fruits and vegetables and other types of innovative foods that are out there now, it's going to take everybody working together in order to feed the world. That's a big task. So going back to Cobb, I think we look at this as not a problem, but we look at it as something that needs to be addressed. And there's not just a silver bullet. There's not one thing that can be done. And there are environmental impacts, social, economic, and all these different things that tie into. So we are really trying to look at it from a holistic package, if you will, but also it's a multi-stakeholder environment. So it's not just Cobb. This is working with others in the industry, allied partners globally, our customers, our distribution. But yeah, so it's not just Cobb involved in this. We have our own internal things that we're always researching and working on as well. But it really is a multi-stakeholder initiative, and it's gonna take everybody to really create this sustainable future.
Thank you. And since we don't have microphones, I think we'll all maybe need to speak up. Speak up just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you. Walter, you've led the Center of Excellence in Poultry Science. There have been multiple research thrusts focused on sustainability. Can you tell us a little bit about how you look at the poultry science research and how that fits into sustainability systems? And maybe some of the major areas that have been of focus for there.
Yeah, we're, as I said earlier, we're looking at kind of a big picture view of sustainability. I agree with the definition of sustainability. We represent a research arm that's for public consumption education. The comprehensive nature of this grant that which is I'm leading. I'm not the. I just want to make it clear. I'm not the ed director or center, but I am project director of this multi-institutional grant. It's really been for me an eye-opener because it exposed me to a lot of things that I just wasn't aware of. When I said comprehensive, it's research, teaching, and extension. So extension is getting the message out. Teaching, obviously, is training the leaders of tomorrow. And then research is to try to come up with things that could be eventually implemented in the industry. We've got a faculty member who has divergently selected. By that, I mean she's created 2 lines of birds that are very efficient in water use and inefficient at water use. And now we're starting to dissect that out, try to figure out what is behind this, what are the cellular mechanisms for it. When we wrote this grant, I looked at that objective as one of holy cow, this is a long shot. It's like if this comes in, it's going to be amazing. I didn't expect it, but it's worked really well. And not only that did it work on getting birds that are more efficient. It did not affect other things that are extremely important in the industry, which is growth performance, which is how much feed it takes to grow birds. So that's just a snapshot of this. And an interesting part of this, we partnered with Cornell, and they have a global class that is taught. And the interesting makeup of this is it's got students from Cornell, it's got students from 2 Chinese universities, students from 2 Indian universities, and in this class, the students have to get together and debate a given topic. And so there'll be a pro topic and a pro stance and a con stance. And the students have to work across all those different things. So it's because the makeup has them all over. So it's a real world situation trying to work. It's a lot of some of the things that I've learned on water, but direct offshoot of this class. I'm gonna stop there. I could really talk for a very long time, but I think I better.
And we will continue in just a minute, but Trevor, I wanted to ask you to respond a little bit to one of the things Walter said about, the genetics of the bird and how that, can lead to more sustainable outcomes. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit about how Cobb-Vantress, how your work might lead to research that could improve sustainability for the DNA.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, Cobb is a genetics company. So we do have a complete research and development team. That includes geneticists, scientists, nutritionists, veterinarians, everybody in between that. along with our technical service teams and our growers that are actually growing the chickens. But on the question, for sustainability and genetics, what does that mean? And if you go back in time and look at genetics, you know, for chickens specifically, I think one of the myths that are out there is that chickens have gotten so large because of steroids and things. It's not the case. That's from selection and looking for traits. That's Walter's mentioned that. And, you know, we look at over 50 traits, our geneticists, when they're looking at the different lines of birds. And a lot of those traits have to do with welfare and even sustainability. So from a health perspective, nutritionally, and as you look at the future, those are the things that our research and development team is working on all the time. It's how can we make genetic progress to continue feeding the world, but do it more efficiently, whether that is through nutrition, with feed conversion. So how much feed does it take to get so much meat, animal, poultry or cattle or swine? The whole industry is looking at these things. But water is part of that. So there's all these different factors that play here. Genetics and sustainability have to work together. That's part of what our team is trying to figure out. I would not say we have all the answers, but that's the fun part. We're trying to figure it out and working with others to do that.
So thinking about the kind of the grand challenge that we started with of the need to feed a growing population. I recall really early on in my career, I worked in Nigeria, and we hosted a speaker, and we went to all the agricultural institutions for the country. And the speaker, who was a U.S. professor, talked about how basically U.S. agriculture, the ability to scale is really what has been able to feed such a large population. And so I think, you know, that's one of the things that you've touched on, Trevor, is the ability to really feed the world at scale. On the other side of that, you know, this particular faculty member made the point that the local food system movement would be sort of counterintuitive to that need. And so Emily's a little bit off Catholic, but I wanted to ask you, kind of on the other side of that, but both and approach, we need to be at scale, but why are local food systems also important, which might be seen as sort of a different side of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, our approach to local food systems is about re-regionalizing our food shed. It's about revitalizing rural economies. And it's about more local food on local tables. It's about us feeding one another and resilient economies and resilient communities, and recognizing that high quality fruits and vegetables can be grown on a small scale, and they can provide small business opportunities for our community members. And through that process, we as individual human beings can also redevelop our relationship with where our food is from. And a lot of times we see, you know, in evidence and research that being connected to our food makes it easier and more comfortable for us to eat foods like fruits and vegetables that may not at first be as familiar when we're eating on a large global scale. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for education and exposure to happen when we have a strong local food system. It has multiple benefits other than just food on our plate and nutrition in our bodies. Has a great way to build our communities and to build up our community wealth at the same time. So, you know, that's
That I think that would be beautiful.
also got the answer for you, but
Well, I think that your point about it's not just the provision of the food, it's also building relationships with food. You know, I was in I left last week, and we had a lot of conversations about all of the food is coming in from very far away. The farmers there are growing, you know, some of the most fertile regions in the nation. The farmers there are growing really rich produce, yet you can't get it at the places where the community members shop. It's unavailable. This, I think it's definitely a both approach. Let me transition a little bit as well. This is something that Trevor and I were talking about right before the panel started. I think we have a lot of academic faculty. We also have community members in the audience on the Zoom. I want to talk a little bit about just the need for process collaboration. And maybe we can start with you, Trevor. You were sharing that Cobb-Vantress is working with academic institutions, the major research initiatives that you all see that you've awarded some grants in that space. So I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you as an industry player look at the importance of academic institutions and R&D and your R&D initiatives.
Yeah. So specifically, this past year, Cobb has launched a new initiative called the Cobb Research Initiative. You can look that up online, and there's lots of details there all about that program. But in short, essentially, we accepted proposals. We had numerous proposals come in, literally from all over the world. Be that from university sector, from research institutes, from others. But that whole initiative is all about partnering for research. So, Cobb has identified different areas that, as we talk about the future and sustainability and genetic progress, areas that we need to progress. So the proposals were all generated based on those categories. You can see all those on the website. But we have accepted 9 grants, and that's going to carry over, I believe, for a couple of years here. But Cobb is actually funding those research opportunities, and this is a new thing for us. It's exciting, and it's an opportunity for us to work with others outside of Cobb. So it is bringing together. I talked about that kind of multi-stakeholder approach, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish. Whether it's the university academic side, or working with institutes and other organizations, and it could be everything from technology, artificial intelligence, nutrition aspects, sustainability. So all of those things, again, play into what we are doing as a global organization. We have to continue innovating. We have to continue trying to figure out what is next and what's going to get us to where we can be. So that's just one way.
And Walter, how have you and colleagues at the Center of Excellence, how have you engaged with industry partners or even other stakeholders? Research.
In the sustainability research, we try to get the message out as much as possible. As a whole, the center works trying to solve whether it's in nutrition, physical health and disease. It's really nice having a major genetics company in our backyard. Basically, there's a lot of faculty have interacted and been funded by Cobb over the years that in things that are addressing major issues for the industry, whether it's broilers or genetics. We're also trying to get students that out there into the industry. We could not produce enough students to meet the needs of the industry as it is. So we're always trying to get more students in. So if any of you know anybody that's kind of I will.
Sustainability, how do you view the need for collaborations between public, private, nonprofit, different sectors?
The Northwest Arkansas Food Systems Initiative, is purposefully aimed at systems approach, which involves multiple organizations, kind of each serving in their unique role at the same time to do the thing that they're really good at, recognizing that they're stronger together than they are on their own. And so the initiative supports several grantees, from the University Division of Agriculture supports the Center for Arkansas Farms and also the Arkansas Innovation Center are partners on this work. There are private nonprofit organizations who are working here in Northwest Arkansas and the Arkansas Land Trust. You know, and then we're also working with the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. And, you know, all of these partners are working together to each do the thing that they're great at. You know, providing skills and training to farmers, providing resources on soil health, providing access to support finding farmland, capital, and then bringing all that food together from Food Hub, connecting it to value-added processing, and then out to organizations and individual consumers through partners like Community Connect, providing low-cost farm bags to, you know, Northwest Arkansas residents who are insecure. And so, you know, at its heart, it says sustainability is important, and, you know, from an ecological and economic perspective, but also recognizing that the system itself has to be sustainable. And so how are each of those organizations, how do we support their capacity building? How do we support them to deliver the thing they're really good at, but also support them work together as a collective to do more than they could do other. So to us, that sustainability is how will they continue this work?
Thanks. All right, we're going to transition just a little bit, and these questions will be for Trevor and Walter primarily. But as we look at sustainable protein, there's been a lot of interest in self-cultivated resources, including plant-based proteins as well. The first two self-cultured meat companies have received regulatory approval in the U.S. And are both producing poultry products. So let's start with you, Trevor. Would you comment a little bit around how Cobb-Vantress might be thinking about this movement, approaching it? What the space?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's fascinating that if these types of initiatives are happening, and when you talk about innovation and feeding the world, I think we could all probably agree that it's not just one sector. So again, like I said earlier, it can't just be one protein. It can't just be chicken, just beef or any of that. There are numerous areas. So there's vegetables, proteins, novel foods, other sources that may not even be there today, plant-based. And it is going to take everybody. So as far as, you know, what we're researching, we're always paying attention as an organization. I think that's just our due diligence. We have a responsibility to understand what's going on, and trying to make sure that we can sustainably feed the world. So, you know, specifically on the self-cultured meat, yeah, that's something that we're watching and researching, just trying to understand what value does that play in the industry and globally in the food supply chain. So yeah, like I said, it's very interesting, and I think it's a very innovative approach, and we're going to continue watching it and see how things go.
Thank you. And Walter, has there been some interest in the poultry science department? Are there any faculty doing tangential research that connects?
At this point, not that I'm aware of. I think I don't know that much about it, so I'm not even sure I'm qualified to talk about it. But until we see what, you know, things, what is the input, what is the output, acceptability, public and other things. I think it is fascinating, and I think that it could be done, and it could have very positive ramifications, because now you change how much fertilizer, protein, and I think there's a certain amount of water recycled. So I think it's another protein source that's coming, but it's not. I don't think it's going to offset, especially in development. It's just personal opinion at this point.
transitioning away from proteins, talk about some of our other nutrients. Emily, can you share a little bit about why the Northwest Arkansas Food Systems initiative has is really focused on fruits and vegetables?
Sure. The initiative grew out of some local food system landscape research that happened several years ago, first in 2014 and then again in 2017, really looking at opportunities in Northwest Arkansas to provide more, fresh, locally grown residents, and found there's a lot of work happening in poultry. We have a Friday calf operation here, but that fruits and vegetables and local production of them at scale in a way that we can access them, not just at farmers markets, which still has a lot of room, but at a larger institutional scale. So thinking about grocery stores, think about schools, hospitals, colleges, and universities. How can we see more fruits and vegetables show up in that space? There's still a lot of opportunity to build here. So that's really what has driven our focus on fruits and vegetables.
Let's see. As we're thinking about some of the innovations and, we're talking about the future innovations, but if we're looking back over the last, say, 10 years, 20 years, I'm wondering if each of you can comment on some of the most significant innovations or interventions that you've seen, that had maybe just a few ideas or a few things that you each have seen that have sort of the opportunity to really drive sustainability.
I can start. I tell you, we have a group in our department. It's not unique to our department, but a number of years ago, the use of feed additives for improving growth, antibiotics, stuff that got pulled out of the feed many years ago, and it still comes up that the public thinks we're feeding antibiotics. But we had to find, that we, the research community and the industry, had to find alternatives to this. So there's been a real explosion in responding to this with probiotics, understanding microbiome changes in the diet that affect the microbiome, and that can have other distal effects in problems such as leg and what's called breast blisters. There's a reduction of that, which is so that's one thing that I've seen in the last probably 15 years is the replacement of what used to be covered with the antibiotics. Another big one, and I'm sure there's, but another big one is trying to improve phosphorus uptake in the diet. And because if you have high phosphorus going out, it can lead to water quality problems, runoff, algal blooms, and all this other stuff. So a lot of people across the research, across the academic part of this, have been able to reduce phosphorus excretion, and they're doing things like various phytases that release phosphorus from the feed, so it's utilized better. I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that there's just a ton of research on this that's supported a lot by allied industry, which are selling things to the industry, and so they are selling these enzymes, other things that improve productivity.
Trevor, major breakthroughs.
I'll probably think of a few other.
I'll kind of tag on what you're just saying. So, yeah, I think it's easy to say technology has played a huge role. Innovative technology in the broiler space. our world. So the kind of the old school ways of farming have regressed drastically. And again, nutrition is probably a huge area. There's been improvements, and that's everything from feed to water, even animal husbandry, management practices, and welfare. Animal welfare is probably the biggest things that I would say has seen an increase. Like you said, over the last 10 years, but you're really just making sure that people understand and that we care for our chickens and their well-being, their health is just as important, because if they're not healthy, we can't provide sustainable, healthy, quality protein. And so as far as progression, I think welfare is a big thing, obviously technology. I think honestly, just some of the learnings that have happened, and from learning from other people and working with other groups to figure out what are maybe new ways of doing that. We used to do things this way, but is there a better way to do it?
I thought of one.
Sure.
So artificial intelligence is obviously growing and everything, and we've got a faculty member, my kid, who's a nutritionist. He is partnered with a woman, and I forget what the part is that she said, but they're looking at how can we use artificial intelligence and to manage the birds, to come up with better diets, the whole input. So I think it's just on the cusp. I don't know. I don't know the area that well, but I think it's all new, and I think there's going to be some huge things come out of it. Now, on the negative side, as an academic teacher, I don't know how we're going to be able to teach our students in the future with this coming up. We're going to have to make some changes, and it's going to really cause changes in the academic.
That'll have to be a topic for a future.
Yeah.
On
Just thought I'd-
ITDAR really focuses on convergence research. We're seeing some really exciting projects with poultry science and our AI computer engineer researchers. I've seen everything from AI computer vision to identify birds that are sick and in the crop space. There's an identifying pests to identify the source of anomalies and environments. So some really exciting progression in the AI space that will support these systems. I also think about, you mentioned technology can kind of the positive direction that can in some ways go the wrong way. I think that is one of the reasons why the holistic teams, these convergent teams, are so necessary, because you're looking at the nutrition side, you're looking at the policy side, you're looking at the engineering, the scientific development. And earlier, Emily mentioned the importance of redeveloping our relationship with food. I recently toured a rice mill, and the person who was showing me said, and here's where we strip all the nutrients away from the brown rice because consumers want the white rice. And then because we've stripped all the nutrients away, with this high-powered, really impressive technology innovations that are now used in rice mills, then we put some powder back on it, so we can sneak in a little bit of nutrients. But it just kind of made me really think about how consumers are wanting the right price and technology to do it, but is it really the best thing for our whole health? And so there's also a lot of focus on turning to our whole health and less processed foods. But back to the original question, Emily, what are some of the major breakthroughs that you've seen during your career?
I mean, that's a good intro to kind of what I was thinking about, and I'm having been in this space in Arkansas in particular for more than a couple of decades now. I think about I was trying to farm in my early 20s, that was, and but how rewarding it was at the same time. And so, like, what's changed, now that we're here and this work is funded, this work is being done in Northwest Arkansas, it's being done across the state. I think about kind of coming from two angles. We've got individual consumers who are really at the grassroots level, learning from one another skills about how to grow food in your own backyard, or how to grow it at scale as a small farmer and make your business thrive in your community, to culinary experts, whether they're formally trained or informally trained, sharing tips and tricks on how to make brown rice taste better, how to get your kids to try things they don't want to, and so I think that beautiful space of like grassroots bubbling up. But I think the truth is policy does drive change, and we've seen our federal agencies and our highest level policymakers start thinking about it, prioritizing global food systems, vegetable production and consumption. And that shows up in your research, Meredith. It's showing up in other research, but it's also showing up in practice, extension, and through other agencies that are designed to put that research and this practice out there in the community and support its uptake at a higher level. And so that support from the highest level, I think, has also been. And then I think about large scale institutions like hospitals, universities, colleges, senior centers, schools, prioritizing health and prioritizing local food, regional food, healthy food, and that purchasing power makes a big difference too. And that the recognition that in their commitment to those things, they have the power to change how our food is produced, and ultimately the farmers, farm workers, and their communities who are supporting that work in the long run. So that, to me, those have been some of our biggest breakthroughs across the country in terms of moving our food system forward into a healthier space.
I have one more
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Like what you just said, I think something that has happened really over the last probably 2 to 3 years is this idea of telling our story. So for agriculture specifically, for a long time, we let other people tell the story of what agriculture was. And it's not true. So we are now trying to retell the story from our lens. So it is education, it's awareness, it's helping people just understand where their food comes from. So we've all heard about transparency. People want to know, where did my chicken come from? What was his name? What was the farmer's name? All these types of things. You scan a QR code and it all pulls up now. So there are efforts happening to try to answer, I think, some of those questions, but we can always do better. And I think that's just another thing that kind of sparked a thought there, because we are trying to tell our story now as an industry. It's not easy, but you got to start somewhere.
All right, we're going to transition now to some questions from the audience. There might be some questions from Zoom as well.
We do have several folks, several guests joining us online, and I think, Emily, to your point about policy, Teresa is asking, can the speakers discuss the impact of California's Prop 12, farm animal confinement and sustainability of animal production? To the extent that you all are familiar with that, or just in general, policies around issues like that and what it means for sustainability of animal production.
These are our animals.
I am not an expert on Prop 12. I do know what it is. I think, again, that's one of those policies that we have to pay attention to, because there's kind of a domino effect that happens. So again, I won't try to speak on that topic specifically. I'm not well versed in that, but it is something that the industry, not just Cobb, industry is definitely paying attention to. That's not the only policy. There's numerous other ones that are on the table that have passed the last couple of years. So again, there are things that are happening because of that. It is a domino effect, and it's not just the state of California. It affects kind of a whole picture, so.
As this, is there legislation or policy that we need to see to enable sort of the next step of where we see sustainable food systems needing to go? I think that's a question for all, of you, right? So what sort of needs to happen? As you mentioned, Emily, if policy does create action and change, what are sort of the things that need to happen for us to continue to build sustainable food systems? What sort of policy changes could we do to happen, to the extent that, you know, we don't want to delve into that?
There are myriad opportunities, as I've been working in space a long time, but I still, again, don't know everything, but some of the policy changes, some of the policy barriers that come up in this space that I work in are around access to capital for farmers who are trying to do things that haven't really been done a lot. So there's not a lot of evidence. So how are they accessing loans and support for scaling up when they want to? Well, that requires money, it requires time. How do we understand risk in that space? We see policies around that can incentivize local procurement. At the federal level, at the state level, at the municipal level, there are opportunities on the ground here in our municipalities for our local decision makers to prioritize some of these things. So there really are a lot of ways, some really big and some small, that we can do to change kind of how our farmers show up in this space, our farm workers are protected in these spaces, how our buyers choose and select and are incentivized to purchase those things. And then again, how our consumers are able to afford it, to find it, and to make it at home. So I think there are policy opportunities all along that chain.
And I'll add one thing to that. In international development, there's kind of this understanding that really well-intentioned programs and policies around food aid, that we're trying to, feed people that need it. But an unintended consequence of that has been killing local food markets and just devastating industries where a country or state was agriculturally rich in something with scale, also sometimes overproduction, and that's given well intentions. And there's actually local examples of that. For example, in Cherokee Nation, USDA was providing charity meat. And actually, Cherokee Nation has many cattle producers that they weren't able to get into that system. So USDA changed their buying policies and now buying more local meat, which is providing a lot of opportunities for the many cattle producers of the region. And so it's just one of those things with well-intentioned policies may not be supporting the producers in those areas.
The only other thing I might say, without getting into any details, there are many policies globally. I know we're kind of talking locally today, but policies and laws, regulations being put in place, everything from antibiotics to cage-free, fill in the blank. There's lots of it. But I'm going to go back to what I said a minute ago, that a lot of that has to do with what I would say is just kind of a lack of understanding or education or awareness of what is actually happening. So again, I think those are all topics from a policy standpoint that we have to pay attention to, because some of these things have already taken place. Some of them have been years in place already, or they're getting ready to happen on a global standpoint. But again, I kind of talked about that domino effect, that it may happen here, but there's a trickle down that ends up coming to us at some point. So I think whatever the policy is, I think that's part of this whole supply chain effort. Is how does this affect not only us as a business, but how does this affect the industry and the entire supply chain? Because it's not just a one and done type thing.
It's very
I've been sitting there kind of doing a conversation in my head, figure out how to answer this, but I'll give an example. You know, we all hear about organic farming, organic growth of animals. My opinion on that is people should have the choice of whether or not to pay additional for that product. And if they believe it's better for them, that's fine. If they believe that it's better for the environment, 100% of the time, not so much. And if they believe that it's a betterment for the health of the animal, that can also be at issue. And an example, I attended the Arkansas Nutrition Conference. It's here, held here every year. This is probably 8 years ago. There was a vet with a land coat, and he was talking about organic milk production. And I didn't know this, but if a grower has a certain number of cows that are in this program, and a cow gets sick, if that cow gets sick and they treat it with antibiotics, then they pull it out. They have to pull it out of the organic. So they have to pull it out and put it into just regular milking, and they lose the income from that. So there was a tendency for these farmers to not treat the animals. So instead of taking care of the animals, it was monetarily driven, and it did not improve the health of the animal. And then he said something that I hope you don't throw up any of the stuff back there, but he said he looked some of the milk of some organic producers. He said it was swimming with white blood cells. So he said it was swimming in pus. And so that's just something, and I don't think the general public wants to know that. I don't think that they don't want that in their component of science in their brain, because they believe very strongly that this is the best thing for the animals. It's not necessarily the best thing for the environment, because a lot of times in organic production, you need a lot more space. You have a lot more space. You don't have a lot of the mechanisms in place when animals are raised in confinement operations. So it's just something to think about. So when you go to add the milk to your coffee, it's not organic.
The whole other topic on milk, on whether low fat is actually the healthiest option, but we'll talk about that.
There's more questions.
Are there any other questions in the room? Anybody? So I know a lot of the times. And it's being efficient. If you have some examples where it's needed necessarily, or it's more expensive. It's like newer or sustainable practices. And I'm wondering if you have any examples of ways you see the strength sort of things.
Could you restate the first part?
So it may be a more sustainable way of producing things down, but it's more well, more efficient necessarily. I'm wondering what sort of approaches you see those two things.
I was thinking about the big industry making a more expensive choice to choose sustainable. Is that kind of what?
Yeah, so then sort of the last piece. See.
A lot of times I think some of the more sustainable practices actually are more expensive. Like in the poultry space, you want to have free range that requires a lot of land and a lot fewer birds. in the house. And so I think that does drive the more premium prices, and kind of goes back to what Walter was saying a little bit about, there's the consumers need kind of both options, conventional and the premium, and perhaps to feed the world, we need both options with less space. So that's something that comes to mind.
But she said that it is person that what I heard did the sustainability content in natural way. And I was thinking, oh, maybe she's talking about symbiotic approach in the sustainability, right? Like in the food industry, the body, you guys are working in the more solar, that is not the right thing, spot, right? And so, is it possible to have a symbiotic approach in, the waste product of one industry could be an input to the third industry and have this, naturally following symbiotic approach in sustainability.
I can actually give you an example. One of the things that's on this sustainability grant was to look at microalgae for as a feed protein. There was a large poultry integrator that actually came to our nutritionists and said, we're looking at the possibility, we'd like to know more about feeding microalgae birds. Could it be done so that the bird would grow well? And we have actually shown that with so in chicken and swine, soybeans are sort of the gasoline that runs the efficiency of these animals, but it's high protein source. And but soybean is going to be eliminated in the future. So there are efforts to try to get different proteins that can be used in the feeding of birds. We found that with the low crude protein soybean meal diet, microalgae did as well in terms of growth and production. It didn't grow as well as the high protein soybean meal, but low protein it did. And the thing that the company was looking at was actually growing algae from scrubbing leftover rumen content. So what was left when animals or cattle was slaughtered, they've got 100 pounds of material that's in there that's loaded with bacteria that are producing CO2 and methane. So they were basically saying, let's scrub these greenhouse gases, use it to grow algae, and then use the algae to feed the chickens. So we know that we can feed chickens low crude protein and they'll work. The problem is that the microalgae as it is right now is too expensive. It will never compete with, at the scale that we have right now, with typical soybean. So if we could get to where there is a larger production of microalgae, it could be something that could be included in the diet. But that's one where that would have been good for sustainability, would have been good for the industry, but except the consumers would have to pay a lot more. And that is unfortunate.
I have one question here. It's about regenerative agriculture, and whether that will be a focus for Arkansas agriculture in the future. What you think about how we might encourage and educate our agriculture.
Yeah, that's a great question. Talking about sustainability, organic, regenerative as kind of an approach to ag that's not just about sustaining our status quo, but about recognizing that climate change is here and that there's been damage done to some of our natural resources already. And so what are ways we can not just keep producing, but also give back at the same time, recognizing that things also are going to change over the future and we need to be able to be resilient and adaptive to those. So I do think that conversation is here, and I think we're seeing it show up in places in Northwest Arkansas and across the state. I was at a conference last week with a large scale commodity grower in South Arkansas, saying regenerative practices on his farm to grow traditional commodity crops. And, you know, did it because he needed to save his farm. And it really was about practices that save him money, but are also fantastic for the soil that he depends on every day to feed his family and feed his community. And so we are partnered here in Northwest Arkansas. We're supporting a faculty member in the Division of Ag, Dr. Matt Bottje and Amanda McWhirter, and they're looking into some soil health practices with farmers in Northwest Arkansas to better understand, you know, what is their soil look like right now, and what are some healthy soil practices that those farmers could put into practice that could potentially improve the productivity and viability of their soil and the food that they're able to grow over time. So we're trying to better understand, you know, what our soil can do, what our farms can do, and what our farmers can and want to do, and then be able to think about how to make that easier for other growers in the region. So I do think regenerative ag is important. I do think it's here, and it's a conversation that's being had, and it's practice that's being, you know, put into place by growers in our region. And you know, my hope is that we continue to see us consider the fact that we've got to think about how we're gonna not just sustain our work, but give back as things change over time.
Well, we're at the hour, so I want to make sure that everyone else have a moment to just give some quick closing thoughts. And the kind of prompt I want to give as we close out is several of you have made the point that everyone needs to work together, different sectors work on this. Students hopefully will greater numbers come into the agricultural industry. And so I want to just kind of close with your final thoughts, and so just kind of some big ideas on what needs to be done. What work needs to be done. So
Not a huge task there. Well, I think I gave a talk not too long ago. It was on water and water scarcity, and said water. The title of it was "Water Scarcity. We're all in this together." And food, you could say food, but we're all in this together. But with in the case of water, it's either too much or too little, or at the wrong time. It's affecting on a global basis the growth of food that is going to be used to feed the world. And like it or not, we're headed to 10 billion in about 20, 30 years, less than that. So we've got to figure out the best way is to do this that's fair and economical. And because we are in it all together. So that's something I do.
I think I would try to summarize by saying we at Cobb believe there's this convergence happening of science and technology, health, specifically for us, animal health, and genetics, which is where we are. And we like to see ourselves at the center of that convergence. And I think, you know, Northwest Arkansas specifically, we're in a very unique position, regionally, geographically, but just with the industries that we have here. And everybody's in one space. That you have industry coming from the coast into the middle of the country. I don't think that's a coincidence. But we have this really, what I would say, like a special opportunity. So we've talked about working together. Everybody has a part and everybody's a stakeholder in this, but what is happening in our area right now, and we have major industry, got two of the world's largest companies in our backyard here in Northwest Arkansas. So there's an opportunity for all of us, I mean, just in this room, but here in this area, as we talk about working together and partnering, whether that's on research or food security, whatever it is. And we're kind of set up in a sweet spot. And as you bring the science community together and you bring industry together and local organizations and I mean, it's all there. We've just got to, again, work together and bring this package, put a little bow on it, however you want to say it.
Thank you, Trevor, and closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, you all summed it up really well, that it takes all of us. That it's also more complicated, you know, to do that, but it's worth the time. And that feeding our communities, feeding ourselves, feeding the world is also a big task. And, you know, kind of, we have to be willing to sit in the tension between intentionality and urgency and not, you know, and not get stuck. And so I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to figure out how we can work together to address things as a collective in a much stronger way than we can as a individual. So
Thank you. As we'll hold your applause for just one moment, I want to briefly mention that these conversations will continue. The IQDAR speaker series come together again 9 a.m. next week for the conversation on well-being. Also, the Northwest Arkansas Tech Summit is coming up, and we have 2 sessions on October 30th. 10 a.m. integrative health technologies for well health, and 3 p.m. Integrative health, sustainable protein, and our impact on health and nutrition. And with that, I just want to thank our panelists for today for a great conversation.
Thank you all very, very much. And, you know, people are here, unfortunately for the people on Zoom, they can't come further, but if you have minutes, maybe we can just formally hang on. But this was a really exciting.
Thanks for inviting.